Hi, my name is Lizania Cruz, and I am a participatory artist and designer, originally from the Dominican Republic, now based in Brooklyn, New York. And one thing that people ask me often is like, what does it mean to be a participatory artist? And I often respond that I work with people, that invite people to be part of the work and the content, and that has different modes and strategies, but mostly that. I worked a lot with oral history and research and thinking about how these things all merge and combine to do happenings in public space and how do we activate the public sphere. So for the past 3 years, I've been working on a project or body of work titled The Investigation of the Dominican Racial Imaginary. And this is like a research and participatory project where I'm looking at the ways in which the institution of the nation state of the Dominican Republic has repressed and erased our African heritage. And I'm thinking about this as like a criminal investigation because I believe this is like a crime that has been done to our identity and ways of understanding ourselves. And I'm also interested in like the ways the law as an institution and a system also has its own sets of bias. So I'm trying to question those as I do the work. And particularly for the work that is at the Alma Lewis, Lizania Cruz Performing Inquiry, I am looking at Samana as we could say like a case study or a folder where Samana is a town in the Dominican Republic, in the north area of the Dominican Republic, part of the peninsula. And it's a town that has like strong links with the African American history of the United States during the era of Boyer, when the Hispaniola was the nation of Haiti. He invited emancipated Black Americans, African Americans to go and settle in the Dominican Republic in exchange of land and work in the land. And a lot of that tradition, a lot of that history is still very present in Samana. So for Performing Inquiry, I went there and interviewed Franklin Wilmore King, which is a direct descendant from that migration, as well as stage a happening of El Bambula, which is a dance and a music that has roots in the Afro-French tradition, and it could also be linked to Congo Square here in the United States. And for the happening, I collaborated with Professor Martire Mercedes, who is the son of Doña Bertilia, which is also a main character in the work that is mounted at the Alma Lewis. And we, in collaboration with some of the youth of Samana and the main school in Samana, show the way of the dance and part of how the music is performed now. And then I documented that and sort of presented all that work as like an evidence in a video piece where I'm looking at the archives and then sort of showing what happened as part of the happening. And what else should we say? So, I should also mention that a big part of the research of this work has come through the archives of Fradique Lizardo, who was a sociologist and a folklorist from the Dominican Republic. And his archive is part of the World's Heritage, UNESCO World's Heritage Archive. And he had an extensive amount of research all throughout the island because he was interested in syncretism and the ways in which the Middle Passage has affected the culture in the Dominican Republic and how it's prevalent today, from food, music, dance, you name it, religious, cultural manifestations. So it's really, this archive is like a treasure that I hope most people, or I hope people get to know and research, and it has changed completely how I interact with this work and how I go about doing this project. So I'm also learning about Fradique as I go, because he was such a character in Dominican culture and sort of like trying to bring into light the African heritage in the Dominican Republic. He has a book that it's called African Culture in Santo Domingo, and in that book he goes around kind of gathering the terminology of miscegenation in Santo Domingo as a colony, and this encompasses like the west part as well as the east part of the island. So for instance, in the terminology diagram, which is like behind us here, this piece is a documentation of a happening I did in Santo Domingo where I asked people to fingerprint with black how they identify themselves, and with red how they've been identified or called or named. And the diagram comes from this book of Fradique's and his research, looking at the different terminologies from the time of the colony and the time after the colony, and contemporary terminology. And this was one of the first times I was able to kind of like understand even words that we use in the Dominican Republic as slang, and how they're attached to this like construct of race and categorization, right? So yeah, like I keep looking and finding his research and sort of like readdressing how that could be incorporated into the work today. And Doña Bertilia I also found through the archives of Fradique Lizardo, and she was an elder in Samana, and the tradition of the Bambula, she's called the Queen of El Bambula, and she was able to sort of keep the tradition alive, and she would commemorate this saint ritual or party, una fiesta. It was like the La Fiesta de San Rafael. And yeah, I've kind of reconnecting with Bertilia as I go, but I'm interested in her because she, from what I see on her imagery and what I read about her, she sounds like a true matriarchal like character, and if I feel like if I would talk to her today, she would be so proud of her African heritage and of her blackness. But yeah, like I've been kind of thinking about how traditions are kept and how we learn things from our elders, and what happens when these traditions are not recorded, they're not passed along, who take care of those traditions, like who takes care of that memory. And yeah, I think like some parts we have the archives, but then I feel very fortunate to be able to talk to, for instance, her grandson, El Profesor Martire. But yeah, so this print in particular, It's a lino cut, and most of the prints that I've been doing for the investigation are a combination of either a technique of printmaking, photolithography, lino cut, etching, and then I use chincolé as like a way to highlight or bring into light a characteristic of the print or of this evidence. And for instance, with Doña Bertilia, I was like really excited about her head wrap because it was something that in all the photographs that I saw of her, she was using, and yeah, I wanted to highlight that aspect of it. So that's like the chincolé part. And for instance, with Richard Allen, the print that is part of the show at Richard Allen was the first photograph that I saw or that I took when I was in Samana. I think this was like the second or third day. And it was a photograph that I took at the pastor's office of the AME church. And it was just like a frame of his stamps from like the US Postal Service. And so for instance, in this print in particular, I wanted to highlight him and just like his portrait. So the chincolé is like around that. Another print is, so there's a silkscreen of the evidence of El Bambula, and this was sort of like the announcement and the invitation for the happening. So kind of I worked backwards on this one because when I was there, I designed this invitation so people would know about the happening, and it was all done, the invitation was all done digitally. But I always wanted to do a silk screen of it. So it sort of also becomes a register for the happening itself, and sort of how do you know what time, when the event took place, and what was going on. So yeah, that's the silk screen. And there's like so many things. And so I just kind of looking at the wall, I'm like, this is my first time talking about it. So as part of the investigation, I've been doing these timelines, and I'm thinking about timelines not in the linear way, because I think that's like a very colonial mindset to look at history, but I am mostly interested if we can look at history through the lens of relationships. And what I've done in order to think about that way is that I've created this Venn diagram, which you could see also in the prints of the suspects and the witnesses. And the Venn diagram is sort of split into the economy and the product side of what could be extracted from the land. The nation as like the government as an institution, and then the middle part is religion, and then the top part is culture and folklore, and then the bottom part is the resistance, right? Because there's always a side that is in resistance to the hegemony, right? And so the timeline is loosely organized in that way. But it's like a compilation of all my research while I was getting prepared to go to Samana and the different archives. And of course, once I landed there, I found new things and kept adding them. So I also wanted to juxtapose moments from the present. So I'm using the slide projector to project on top of the archive with photographs that I took while I was there. Photographs of people that I interview, photographs of people, artisans that I, bought products from and then interviewed them for the project, and just like the market, what was it like to be in this town. And then as a backdrop to that is actually a photo of the area and the place where Doña Bertilia was born and where she had her house, which is like completely abandoned and destroyed. And it's so saddened to see how these places that at some point were memorialized as like a place of culture and heritage, because I believe it was in the 80s they built this house to kind of like commemorate that this was a place where the party of San Rafael and Bertilia lived, and now it's just like an abandoned area. So I've been taking these photographs of like very for me, that there are like special places of our culture that have been abandoned by the government or even ourselves. And there's like a similar photo that I did of Boca de Nigua, which is the first sugar mill that had an enslaved rebellion. So I bring my detective gear and sort of like, like those little evidence, kind of like, I don't know what they called, but the devices to kind of name the number where the evidence was found. And I photographed the place as to show in what conditions they are. So yeah, it's like a layered timeline of like the present and the past, what's found and what's not there. Because like one of the things that I'm very mindful, as Sadia Hartman tells us all the time, is that when we're looking at the archives, what is there and what's not there? What is the story that is actually not being told or invisibilized by the archive itself?